QB Chase.
G'day, listeners, and welcome back to another very special episode of the Matter Mentality podcast, where we talk all things training, nutrition, and psychology to optimize your performance. Today, I'm joined by another very special guest. We actually connected through some colleagues that we had mutually shared over in America, and we managed to get in touch, thankfully, from one of our good friends, Ali Gilbert. I'm joined by a men's TRT health specialist and a head health coach for Primal Zone. My man, Dave Lee, how are you doing, brother? How are you doing on a Monday afternoon?
I'm doing well, bro, because it's Monday morning where I'm at. So it's I'm doing very well, bro. It's had a couple of busy weeks in the States, speaking at a couple of events and just getting settled back in, which is always fun. But yeah, it's good to be home and good to be here. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. We've had a chat not too long ago off air where we definitely dove into some things, and I was kind of like, I don't like to script things when I have these conversations, but I do like to kind of, see where the conversation might go and what we can kind of dive into, because everyone has their niche in their fields. But, once we sort of got rambling, and straight away I was like, this is going to be a conversation that gets some people either thinking or very, very quickly upset. And either way, I'm all for both of those things. Quick wrap up, mate. You've just presented at the Olympia University, which congratulations on that. I know speaking to Ali and myself, that's something that I would love to be able to do one day. And I know Ali was excited about it. So kudos to you I wouldn't even say Olympia is your sort of standard crowd, right? Like that's probably something a little bit different to what you're normally speaking to.
Yeah, I would say so, because I came more from a mental health background than a physical fitness background. I think a lot of the guys in the TRT space transition into this from bodybuilding and sports and performance, but I transitioned into this space out of dropping out of psychiatry, because I realized that hormones were the main thing driving, I guess, not driving mental health, underpinning mental health. And
yes.
I'm sure we'll go into that. But yeah, the Olympia was different for me. I was definitely the smallest guy at the Olympia, that's for sure. And yeah, no, it was fascinating. It was really cool because there was a collective of people called Dominate Your Game, and as well as Balance My Hormones from the UK. And they put together like a side event at the Olympia, which was basically educating around PED use, anabolic use, harm reduction, and doing things properly, recognizing that people are going to do what they're going to do, but then also guiding them to do it right. So I had the blessing to be able to speak on my main area of interest, which is all the hormones around TRT, which are like neurosteroids, thyroid, things like fertility, etc. And it was fantastic. Got to run a similar webinar for Marek Health, and that whole presentation is actually going to go on YouTube probably by the time this podcast goes out, so people will be able to watch it. Fantastic. And it was fantastic to be able to get that content out there and have people actually take time out of their day to sit down and listen to me give a university style lecture on a bunch of hormones, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely the positive that I think this area of sports, let alone bodybuilding in and of itself, is needed. It's definitely an area that needs to come up, I guess, in the mainstream, and the understanding, the comprehension. Is it's not just a matter of like, here's 5 different esters at 5 grams total per week, just take it and shut up. It's like actually understanding what these things do as different esters, different compounds, different stack designs. These things start to play a toll. They play a role. They impact you. They have their trade-offs of toxicity and, yes, androgenic like benefits, but there's a lot that you're weighing up when you decide to do this. And I think it's about time that the industry itself starts to get to that acceptability of responsibility and education. So having that at the Olympia, I think, is fucking huge.
Absolutely, because people are fucking dying. So it's a good thing that people are starting to take a look at this and going, oh, fuck, I don't want to die. And actually starting to look at their health proactively. Like one thing that I spoke about at Silverback, I use the analogy of cars. And I don't know shit about cars, so people, if people want to cry about it, they can correct me in the comments. I'm not going to read them. But the thing we all know about, it's funny. Like the reason, in terms of going back to pissing people off, the reason why I'm wearing this jacket is I did like a video a while back, and I'd just driven like 6 or 7 hours, and I was running late, and I was still wearing my jacket, and I jumped on, and everyone's like, "Why the fuck is this guy wearing a leather jacket in his video? Who does he think he is?" So I hope they're watching the video, because now I just wear it ever since. So in terms of like the Olympia stuff and the stuff around harm reduction with bodybuilding, I think that it's an inevitable conversation to have with what's happening in men's health, but also the rise of social media, is that people are now realizing that, yeah, if you pump yourself full of a whole bunch of drugs in insanely high doses, and then you also like dirty bulk, or, follow like a filthy, if it fits your macros approach to nutrition, don't do any cardio, and do that, over a long enough trajectory, yeah, it'll catch up with you, and then you'll fuck around and find out. And I think that it's very sad that this is what's happened, and it's very sad for the people who have died from this. I think it's absolutely heartbreaking, but I think it can also serve as a lesson for the upcoming generation, particularly the younger guys who are looking to get into this, going, okay, this may be something that could take not just years, but decades of my life. But if I am going to do it, there is definitely, I wouldn't say that there is a way that you can have your cake and eat it too. I mean, there's always going to be risk, and there's always going to be harm. And, I met Vigorous Steve at the Olympia, and I think he's a good person for championing the risks of this stuff in terms of really understanding the importance of doing not just blood work, but organ imaging as well. It's something I'm huge on. And I think it's great that people are starting to look at this proactively. And I think, going back to the car analogy, is that it's the best thing that we can do with our cars, as far as I'm aware, is to get them serviced regularly every time that check engine light comes on, so that you're not driving your car around, because that's how you get a bigger bill, right? That's how you destroy the car, is driving a car that you need to service. And not waiting until the wheels fly off to go to the mechanic is the most important thing. I think the same thing should be said with both physical health and mental health.
Yeah, completely agree. Obviously, given my background and what I've am studying currently, it bewilders me when those things are almost like either taboo to talk about, or like it's this abstract thought that, well, I'm doing all this stuff physically in the gym, but I'll wait until I'm ready to, borderline like self-delete before I go and speak to someone about it, or, wait till my entire life has collapsed because all I did was focus on this one narrow aspect and the rest of my life's gone to shit. Oh, now it's all caved in, I might go address it. Or now my blood panels are completely destroyed. Oh, I might go and try and improve my calcium scores or my cholesterol levels. And it's like, well, these are the things that we should probably have addressed 12 months ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, before you got here. And now it's like, well, you're here and it's a bit too late. Sure, we can offset some things, but, these are the things that we should have looked at. I mean, you look at any other sport or like health-based hobby, you look at rugby league, especially in Australia, you look at NFL, the sporting interests that they have in terms of like self-care, preservation, health, longevity, they know that they're at the risk with these collisions and concussions and damage, but they put everything in place to protect the athletes as much as possible and take care of them. When it comes to like this side of the game, it's like, oh, you're off on your own. See you later.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And it's the same with entrepreneurship as well. I mean, I think that it's the same thing goes with bodybuilding and people who are running businesses. It's like, if you want to perform, or if you want to look like a professional athlete or a high level professional in your field, you need to look after yourself like a professional athlete. And that's what these people are missing, is that, and it's not that you can't perform at a higher level. It's that, Paul Chek talks about working out and working in. And he says that you should spend equal time working into working out, which is like basically proactive recovery. And that can be anything from steady state cardio, mobility, stretching, mindfulness, fucking massage, whatever floats your boat. But it's understanding that there has to be investing time in looking after yourself to actually be able to perform at the level that you want to look at. And I think that can be extrapolated out to a lot of different areas of physical and mental health. But the most important thing, going back to what you were saying, is that I think that bodybuilding is, firstly, it's one of the only sports that people think, and I'm not into bodybuilding either, so I mean, I can say this from the outside looking in. I think it's interesting that it's one of the only sports that a lot of people will get into without having a coach. Like every other sport, every other discipline, like coach. Whereas like people, the amount of guys who I meet just injure themselves and wreck themselves in the gym because they've never had a personal training session. That blows my mind. Like one of the most valuable things I did in my recreational lifting spout, whatever you want to call it, I just like going to the gym and lifting weights, is that I found the best personal trainer in the city that I knew. And I said, hey, can you help me like workshop my big lifts so I don't hurt myself? Because I think I got up to like maybe like 100 on the bench, like 120 on squat, like 140 on deadlift or something. And I was like, I'd had people guide me before, but I was like, can we do like 8 to 10 sessions where you just like correct my form and workshop these lifts and get it right so that I can, future-proof myself for not injuring myself. And I don't understand why more people don't do stuff like that. And I do understand it's because, going back to the fucking around and finding out thing, I mean, you don't have a problem until you do.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the podcasts like these are great. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have this discussion and for people's attention, because this is the stuff that people should be listening to and going, okay, these people have seen a bunch of stuff down the line in terms of their own experience, but also what happens working with clients. Like I've got thousands of guys I've worked with over the last few years. And this is one of the reoccurring themes, is that like, if you put preventative measures in place, both with your health and your training and just looking after yourself in general, you can avoid a whole bunch of the pitfalls that we fell down and that everyone else fell down. And I think that they're all things that are going to be a net benefit for you overall anyway. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic area to delve into.
Yeah. And like that, yeah, it's something that I've always endeavored or envisioned that a lot of this stuff be given away for free, because they're exactly as you described. Those problems need to be addressed from our experiences and anecdote, as well as the education. Like I know how many men don't have the time or interest to sit down and read through the data and research and studies and go do psychiatry, psychology, exercise science. But you have access to conversations like this that are just free. They're little on YouTube's and Spotify's and podcast streaming services. Like, just go listen. You don't have to give us anything. It's just that from us, you get to prevent the injuries and mistakes we've made, or not go down the route that other people have made with those mistakes. But to kind of come back as well is, as we sort of said in the introduction, a good friend between both of us is Ali Gilbert. How'd you go with Silverback, and obviously being a part of that? And I know Primal was Primal a sponsor for Silverback, or are they sponsoring the Australian one?
They sponsored me going to Silverback, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, cool. And yeah, how was that? Because I know Ali, like me and her were back and forward 100 times on how pumped she was for it and nervous and busy. And so I'm very glad to see it went well, but obviously a big chance for you as well over in America to talk and educate.
I calling Ali Gilbert a good friend is a stretch. I tolerate her existence. Ali is fantastic. Ali is fantastic. I made a joke at her expense during the Marek webinar I did when I was at her house, and people thought I was like being serious about tolerating her. No, Ali is one of my favorite people in the world, and we had an amazing time because there was a handful of us who spoke at the Olympia, and then we all went to Silverback together. So we had like a group house in Florida that we all stayed at and got to hang out at, and yeah, it was a heap of fun. It was and then when we went to Florida, she had us at her house for a couple of days, and we all traveled together. So I was in a band for like 7-8 years when I was younger, and it was like being on tour again. It was like you get this like pack mentality. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, she looked after us phenomenally well. She hosted us amazingly well, and she put together this event, the Silverback Summit, which was like her brainchild. And I've been working with her for we actually can't remember. I think it's a couple of years, but we've been working together for a long time now. And she came to me with this concept before the first one. This was the third Silverback event that we did. There was a first one, then there was an online one. And she was, I wouldn't say she was nervous, but she was uncertain of whether the event would work. It was a new concept. And myself and a bunch of other people, myself with a background in marketing, I was like, yeah, you will nail this. This will be awesome. Yeah. And seeing the evolution of that in terms of where it came from, in terms of, I've got this crazy idea of making a men's health event that is fun and lighthearted and has a whole bunch of personality and is not a boring medical conference, but also has some of the best speakers in the world delivering speeches, everything from the science-based nitty-gritty doctor roundtables to, speaking about mental health, running businesses, and kind of everything in between. And the thing that she nailed with that, not to blow too much smoke up her ass, don't want her head getting too big, but she
fuck you, Ali.
yeah, fuck that. No, she managed to make an event that was appealing to patients and practitioners. And that's something that I always try to do with all my content, is making it deep and diverse enough that doctors and nurse practitioners and health coaches can learn from it, but also presented in a way using vocabulary and vernacular that actually appeals to the layperson, in terms of like, here's the shit that you need to know in words that you can understand, so that you don't feel like a dumbass when I use big words to bamboozle you to make me sound smarter than I actually am. So she did it. It was a fun event. It was a insightful event. And as we were saying kind of off air, like that was the Olympia. And, the first speech I gave live for people in health coaching since university, the first time I've spoken in front of people was the Olympia, which was cool. It was a bit of a whirlwind. And it was phenomenal. It was phenomenal. And one of my favorite, there was a lot of highlights in terms of the concepts of it, but one of my favorite things was seeing how many patients and enthusiasts were there. And
Yeah.
these were people who had flown in, or they'd taken, flown in and or taken, a few days out of their time to come and participate in a medical conference to become better versions of themselves. And I think that that is a fantastic reflection of where a subset of the population is at, emphasis on subset,
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
wanting to gain a better understanding of not just being like, okay, I realize I need to work on self-development, but being like, okay, how do I actually stick the landing with this? What do I
Yes.
actually do to execute this? And to be able to have a conference which was all the best minds, and then me, just some dumbass health coach from Australia, just jumping in as well, but all the best minds plus me in the world on this topic was phenomenal, because the amount of knowledge across a huge broad range of areas that was shared was unreal. And yeah, it was amazing to be able to just be there. Like the energy there was absolutely unreal. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's unreal. You can't really give much more of a prop to, especially summits. Like, one thing I've noticed in Australia is, we don't have enough summits and those sort of events where, especially in the fitness, health, coaching, body composition, performance realm, like, it just doesn't exist as much. And having been to the ones that we've been to in America now and seeing the ones we have seen, the ones that are fun and, like, as you said, like, you've spoken it to the layperson, you've made it in a comprehensive way where it's like, one of the things I hate is doctors talking to other doctors and trying to outdick each other about who's a better doctor in terms of their vocabulary and their language. When you're actually communicating to the people to solve their problems, it's like, holy fuck, mind blown. Give this guy all the money and time and, like, my vote, and fucking, basically praise him forever, because you actually explained it to them in a way where it's like, oh, this is the problem, this is the solution. This guy just gave it to me in a simple way I can walk away with right now. Those ones are the ones that I find so much more rewarding to be a part of or be at.
Absolutely. And like, I don't know shit about working with women. I only work with dudes. I don't understand women, period. But what I understand about dudes is that we need to logically understand the why. So
Yes.
I think that that's the most important thing that a lot of people skip out on. And I also see, doctors and health coaches whinging about patient compliance, is that if you tell a guy to do something, he's not going to do it just because you told him to, especially
100%.
if he's been doing the opposite for X amount of years, and that's why he's fucked, right?
Yep.
Is guys need to understand the why. So, and I think that's the most important thing, is if you truly understand something, you can explain it to a 5-year-old. Now, I might not literally be able to explain HRT to a 5-year-old, but it's important to be able to break things down into words that people can understand, but also teach them the why in a way that they can understand as well. Yeah. And I think that's the ultimate driving force for men in terms of like, well, why are you actually at this event? Why are you listening to this? I mean, that's the thing I love about podcasts and YouTube and all this kind of stuff, is to like, with Netflix, fucking Disney Plus, YouTube, everything else. I mean, people can, Spotify, you can listen to anything that you want at any time of the day. And the fact that people are choosing to listen to this kind of stuff in terms of working on self-development, I think that that's a fantastic step in the right direction. So you've already kind of got this opt-in in terms of like, okay, I'm here to learn, I'm here to improve myself. But I think guys need one step further. They need to go, okay, well, how is this actually going to work? What is this going to translate into? What's the ROI going to be? What's it going to look like? What's it going to feel like? But I also need to understand to a degree how this stuff works. And I think that the average layperson is not going to be able to stand the complexities of the endocrine system and the neurosteroidal system and all these different things, but they can understand enough of it that it's going to stick and it's going to drive change. And I think that that's the most important thing for these guys and people who are presenting to understand, is that we need a why, but we also need to kind of know a bit of the how. And I think that's very important. So at the Silverback Summit, I've done 3 lectures now, which I've called Your Brain on Testosterone and the War on Masculinity. I made a joke at this one that there didn't really need to be a third one. I just like things in 3s, but it was just kind of an excuse to make it a trilogy. But anyway, the first 2 are on YouTube. They're all free, and this one I'm going to find a way to get it on YouTube at some point. But the thing that I was really speaking to in this speech, which I think kind of wrapped up the first 2 together, is helping guys understand their subjective experience of reality, helping guys understand what the human experience is, which is a complex, interconnected series of systems like a car, but you're also alive and sentient at the same time. So I called my speech like Cars the Movie. I think that's a great example of how the human body is that we're like a car, we're an interconnected, like engineering-based machine, but we are also sentient and conscious and experience emotions from the outside world, but we're also experiencing ourselves being alive. And I think that when you break that down and then you break down the challenges of the modern world as well, and then you apply that to endocrinology, medicine, health, and fitness, I think that can kind of create a lot of purpose and meaning
Yes.
to what a lot of guys are trying to do with improving their physical and mental health.
Yeah, that's a huge amount. Like the very using Cars the movie, I think, is a very real analogy to go with, and for lack of better words, I guess, real being relative. It's a very like it's presented in almost like a meta philosophy concept, I guess, of like of internalization and psycho awareness. Because it's true, it is true. Like everything, it's we start going back to the behaviorists versus the free wills versus the early phases of psychology, where there's the determinists, there's the behaviorists, there's people saying like this is purely a behavioral based response. This is purely like you are a system of habituation and your behaviors. Then there's the guys coming out saying, actually, it's free will and you have the choice to do these things and you actually get to experience life and, go through CBT and go through mindfulness and have these moments. And then it's like, getting people to understand that almost meta thought process where you're actually alive inside yourself. You can experience your reality, but also make meaning of your reality, but also then determine your reality based on your actions in response to that. It becomes a very fucking powerful level of thought provocation when you can actually have that conversation and get men to understand like, oh, suddenly I'm not just meant to be that guy who wakes up and goes to work at 5 a.m. and is home by 3 p.m. and simply just sits on the couch and watches the TV. I can go on my hero's journey. I can go on my comeuppance sort of moment. I can go on that hero's anticipation and develop myself because now I've had that thought about what it is to be alive and be me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that a lot of guys are trying to do, whether they realize it or not, I break it down very simply, that we are trying to improve our subjective experience of being alive. I think that's what we're all trying to do. We're trying to make life, we're trying to experience a better quality of living. And one thing that I like to layer into that in terms of like, okay, well, how does neuroscience play into this? How does testosterone play into this? How do all these things work? And one thing that I think is a very good example, I mean, you brought up free will. I like having the conversation with people about, is there such thing as free will? And I truly believe that a lot of people do not have free will because they don't have the ability to actually regulate their thoughts and emotions and actually take action. So I'm a big believer that people have the capacity to develop free will. But that's the first thing that you need to do, is to be able to stop being a leaf in the wind and make a fucking choice and execute it and stick to it. That's not an easy thing to be able to do. No. And not being able to do that doesn't mean that you're retarded. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you need medication. But it probably means that you need to develop a skill that you might not have developed or practiced in a long time. If a child is, whatever age that they learn to tie their shoes and they can't tie their shoes, we don't just assume that they have some kind of mental retardation and need medication. We just go, oh, you just haven't been taught enough, or maybe you need a few more lessons than Bob or Jill or whoever else. And that's okay. And I think adults are the same, but we're too quickly to label ourselves as defective, as broken.
Yes.
When in reality, we just need some support. We just need to do the work. So I like to look at purpose and meaning as very important things for how the brain works, because at the end of the day, we are, these machines which are driven by dopamine. We are governed by stress hormones. We are governed by a whole bunch of internal systems, and we're reacting to those things which are paving our experience of life. But when I look at what biohacking is, and I hate the term biohacking, but I also love the term biohacking, is if we can understand how our brain works and we can understand how we can change what we do rather than just focusing on what we take, because that's a huge fuck up that a lot of people do, is it can be as simple as learning to harness your thoughts and attention through something like mindfulness. And then with intention and with goals and with purpose and outcome, we can create meaning in the mundane to make it more dopaminergic. And the example I like to use is that, like, I don't like cleaning my room. I don't like making my bed. I don't like picking the clothes up off the floor. I don't like doing any of that shit. But not being like, when guys are like, oh, I can't keep my room clean. I can't do anything unless I enjoy doing it. It doesn't mean you have ADHD, dude. It just means you need to learn how to do the work that you don't want to do.
Yes.
And the example I use is that I remember the first time that my girlfriend came over to my bedroom, I cleaned that fucker to the nth degree. I was completely capable of doing it. I just needed a motivator to make me want to do something that I didn't want to do. And I think if you can develop the skill of determination and resilience in terms of, and Andrew Tate says this, and he says it very well, is that life as men is about learning how to do work that you don't want to do to get the reward. I'm paraphrasing, to get the reward that you want at the end of the day. And I think a lot of us have this deficit in not being able to do the work that we don't want to do, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. It doesn't mean that we're incapable. It just means we need to learn how to do that. And I think if we can understand that applying meaning, number one, but also understanding that the baseline health of the body is critical for this, because if you're inflamed to shit and you're hypergonadal and you're putting shit quality food and nutrition into your body and you're not exercising, you're not moving, then your baseline operating state is going to feel absolutely fucking awful. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't overcome that with willpower, but it means it's going to be way fucking harder to do that than if you were actually, one, healthy, and two, had momentum in doing this. So I think what we need to start doing is, just going on a big fucking tangent and then bringing it home, is that one of the most important things that we can start doing is one, understanding that you can't have optimal mental health with suboptimal physical health. It is impossible. Yes. You can't be a Formula One driver in a piece of shit Suzuki Swift. You can't. It doesn't work. So that's number one. Right? And that can be an expectation that I think a lot of people have difficulty with. And it's like, well, yeah, you can take antidepressants and trick your brain into thinking that you're doing better than you are, because that's what they're doing. But you're going to know, well, one, they don't work because there's side effects, right? It's not that simple. But I think on a conscious level, you also know deep down that what you're doing isn't right. And the important thing that we need to understand is going, okay, how can I work with the body? How can I enable myself to get to the point that I need to go? And ultimately, how do I close the gap between where I am now and where I want to be?
Yes.
And I think the way that you do that, if you're looking at a big cliff and you're like, okay, I want to get from here up to there, you create steps to be able to get yourself from the ground up. And I think that's the simple process is reverse engineering, going, okay, well, this is the optimal version of me. This is what he would do, what he would wear, how he would look, what his daily routines would be, what he'd eat, how his relationships would be, all that kind of stuff. And going, okay, well, what does that guy do day to day that I'm not doing now? What habits does this guy have that I can start to embody? And then how can I slowly build momentum? Because I think momentum is one of the most important things as well. It's like, and how can I start measuring how far I've come as opposed to how far away I am from my goal in terms of getting to where I want to be? And when you're on that path and when you're on that journey, I think that it can become addictive. And I think that it can also give you quite a quick reward in terms of your experience of life. It gets better quickly. And if you can hold on to that, and if you can measure that, and if you can embody that and really focus on it, I think that can propel you towards ultimately where you want to go. But it's also understanding that you are empowered and you have the ability to do that. You just need to take a swing at it and give it a go.
There's so many things I agree with and want to unpack in that fucking point alone. Going back, I think there's a big issue there, and one of the big things that you just kind of covered there is well, the way you just described goal setting there, and almost like what I call micro checkpointing. It's a very top-down process that I use with my clients, in that I use emotional contrasting, where, if someone comes to me and says, I don't know where I want to go in the future, I don't know what my goals look like, cool, that's fantastic. What does it not want to be? What do you not want to be as a person? How do you not want to look, feel, think, be as a human? If there was to be like a 5-year fail plan for you, what would that look like? Because if you don't know where you want to go, we can start with where you, if we don't know where you want to go, we can start with where you don't want to go. So what does that look like? Oh, well, I don't want to be a bum. I don't want to be unemployed. I don't want to have no skills. I don't want to be broke. I don't want to be X, Y, Z. Okay, so you do know where you want to go because you don't know where you want to go. You know where you don't want to go. From that, you can then stop identifying with all the bullshit you've come up with, because, as you said, everyone starts coming up with these deficits and these deficiencies that they apparently have, which is like, every Tom, Dick, and Harry now has this narrative identity around ADHD, this mental disorder, this sexual identity disorder, this fucking absence of physical capability, this back injury, or this, and all these things. And I know between both of us, we're both walking examples of the fact that we've had spinal damage, we've had car accidents, we've had physical disabilities that, by logic and this same premise, should inhibit us from doing the things that we've done and currently do and are projecting towards. Yet both of us are clear walking examples of the fact that doctor's diagnosis does not represent my entire identity and allow me to be succumbed by that situation and experience. So if we're creating this narrative about who we are, why don't we stop? And this is something that I find, I guess a really good tangent to that kind of men's health point, is that society is so weakened in the West at the moment that everything is a justification and an identity with some sort of negative that is preventing you from progressing in life. It's giving you your victim card. It's giving you that fucking badge of honor that somehow is a badge of honor, where we can restrain ourselves from striving, we can be stuck where we are, we can be anchored to the fixtures that we have, and kind of use that as a justification for weakness and being just undriven, undisciplined, purposelessness, not having a motivation, not having a drive to do or achieve anything. And then we're going, oh, I actually have all these limitations and these deficits, and I have this mental disorder. And then, well, do you think if you stopped identifying with everything that you think is wrong with you, if you think you stopped creating a narrative around your weakness and actually started creating a narrative about someone who succeeded and went forward and moved and strived towards things, as you said, looked at that where you want to be and started living towards that versus, oh, that's too far away from me. My life is hard. I can't reach that. That's too much for me. I'm stuck down here. That's always going to be me. If you use that cognitive reappraisal and flip that switch, well, suddenly there's a few less mental problems that you have, because I have found in so many men, when you actually just start striving, the action, the simple act of striving removes so many deficits and depreciations that you just inevitably start progressing and getting better. And as you said, it becomes that addictive tendency where now I have the motivation, which is associated dopamine, which is an anticipatory response. Now I have that accumulation of anticipation and excitement. I want to keep going. And now I want to keep going. I want to get better at it. And now all of a sudden that depression that I had and that ADHD that I apparently had and that lack of focus that I had, and, you know, my wife was a piece of shit and my family this and that and my boss was a dick, suddenly those things don't matter. And you've actually got a few more skills up your sleeves that are progressive and getting you towards that goal. I think that too many people, especially in Western culture, have too much time in their hands and too much lack of purpose, where they're able to identify with so many problems that is the reason that they, you know, can't exist in success and they can't achieve what they want, because they fucking identify with it. They spend all their time being identified with the narrative they create around their own bullshit, that it stops them actually striving, because now they've just anchored to what they've created as this identity. It's what gives them their pleasure. It's what gets them the pity party. It's what gets them their, you know, the DMs and the reactions, because, well, woe is me and everyone give me pity. And so it just reinforces this bullshit even further, right? And to me, like you kind of addressed there, there's so many ways around that by simply, how about we start identifying who you want to be and work towards that?
Yeah, bro, there's a lot there. So one of my favorite quotes on this is from a song. It's by a guy called Andrew WK, and it's ironically titled "Totally Stupid," but it's a rhetorical question, which is would you give up everything you want to get everything? Sorry, would you give up everything you've got to get everything you want? And then would you give up everything you want to get everything you've got? I think that that's an important thing for people to look at, because if I think society is programming you and it's programming us all in real time to want to spend money to fill the void inside. And a lot of the time, and again, my background's in marketing. So using fear is the most important marketing tactic to drive sales, because fear shuts down your prefrontal cortex. It makes you more likely to make impulsive decisions. So if you understand that a lot of your insecurities and a lot of your wants and desires and needs are coming from a lack of gratitude for what you have, then I think that that's a really important thing for people to start looking at, is going, okay, well, firstly, why do I think I'm such a piece of shit? Why do I think I need all these other external things to make me happy when I actually have a whole bunch of shit that I don't really think about how grateful I am for? Because you'll get the next thing and then you won't give a fuck about that. And then you'll want the next thing after that. So that's number one. I think that's very important. But the other part that, you know, Jordan Peterson talks about, and he had a really great quote. I went and saw him in, of all places, he spoke in Vilnius to an arena. Like, I didn't, like, a non-English speaking Baltic country. The dude fucking packed out an arena. There was no translator. And he still packed out an arena here because people wanted to hear what he had to say about self-development and self-improvement. I think that's amazing.
That is fantastic.
He said that, yeah, and he says that, you know, competence breeds confidence. And I think that that's the most important thing. When we look at all these disorders in terms of, and that's what's so important, is that these are disorders, they're not diseases. These disorders are very real, but they're behavioral disorders. They're not something that is broken from birth. You're not defective. You've just got a disordered pattern of behavior. And a lot of the time, what underpins these disorders can also underpin greatness if it's channeled properly. And I think that's the most important thing, is that every single person I've met who's been a high functioning business entrepreneur has been ADHD as fuck. They've just found something productive to put it into. And I think that a lot of people are anxious because they lack competence and they're genuinely afraid of the world, and they fucking should be. And I think a lot of people are depressed because they live depressing lives. That makes sense. But I also think that people do have the power to make these changes. But ultimately, I think firstly, it has to come from a place of self-love. But I also think that a lot of people don't love themselves for good reasons. They don't keep promises to themselves. They don't look after themselves properly. They throw caution to the wind and fuck their future self for the benefit of their current self. And then they say they're going to wake up the next morning and, diet starts tomorrow. I'm going to get up at 6 and do cardio, and you hit the snooze button. Yeah, I'd hate myself too. Like you can't trust anyone in this world, and you can't even trust yourself. You're fucked. So I think that people can get themselves into a real difficult rut. And I think that the modern world encourages weakness and encourages subservience. It doesn't encourage sovereignty. And it doesn't encourage us as sentient beings to be able to override the bullshit of the world and make a change, because the world does not want strong, healthy, independent thinkers. It wants people who are compliant and will do the bare minimum to be able to pay the taxes and keep society in order and be a good little boy and shut the fuck up. Don't question the powers that be, and do what you're told. And I think a whole bunch of people as a result of that are becoming depressed. And I think that that's fair. But I also think that a whole bunch of people are starting to, wake up from the matrix, without sounding too cliche, and realizing and going, hang on, this whole system's bullshit. This whole paradigm is a lie, and it's making me and everyone around me sick and miserable. And I want to do something about it, but I don't know where to start. And I think, going back to what you said before about, not knowing your purpose and not knowing where you want to head, you just don't want to be where you're at now. I think there's two important things to understand there. One is that you can't see the top of the mountain from the bottom. Like, you don't know what's up there. It might be above the clouds, but you know that you need to start climbing up. So if you're at a point where you're at rock bottom and you're like, I don't know what I want to be at the end of the day, I don't know where, okay, cool, that's fine. Your purpose is finding your purpose, and finding your purpose is moving forward. And once you get far up enough the mountain, you might be able to see what's at the summit. But you know that you just need to keep moving forward and not regressing back. And I think that's the most important thing. So when in doubt, just put one foot in front of the other and move forward.
Yes.
Go, okay, I don't know where I'm heading. I don't know what I need to do, but I certainly know what I don't need to do. Like what you mentioned before, like a whole bunch of guys don't have positive role models in their life. I'm sure you've got a whole bunch of negative role models. Use that.
Yep.
That's super powerful.
Yep.
So I think that's a really good point to look at. But I think the other point to look at that's important is that if you're in a place of discomfort now, whether it's your physical health or your mental health, if you do nothing, it's not going to stay the same. It's going to get worse. So that part is a massive wake-up call that people need to understand. And it's uncomfortable, but it sucks, because people need to realize that you're not going to stay where you are. You're going to move forward, or if you do nothing, you're going to move back, and it's going to get worse. So, and if you let it get worse and you let yourself get further off track, it's going to be much harder to inevitably get back on track when you inevitably do hit that rock bottom where you actually have to drive a change. And this can all be really difficult, uncomfortable shit to hear, but that's all it is. It's uncomfortable. It's not really that painful. It's just uncomfortable. It's going, oh, okay, I fucked up. I fucked up for a while. I didn't know better. But that's also okay. And it doesn't make you a victim. It doesn't give you entitlement to shit. But what it does do is go, okay, I fucked up. I didn't know better. I was led astray. And now I need to get my shit sorted. And I think the most beneficial thing for guys at that point to understand is that it's like, yeah, a whole bunch of us have been there, and a whole bunch of us are climbing up that mountain at different points. And there's guys who are on top of the summit who are yelling, come up here, keep going, keep going. But it's understanding it's like, okay, you're not alone. You're surrounded by a whole bunch of people going through the same shit, and everyone's trying to work it out, and that's cool. But I think the first thing that guys should do in these situations is find yourself. I think there's two things that you need. I think one, you need a goal. And I don't think that people should want to be like, whoever their goal person is, whether it's someone like David Goggins, Jocko Willink, whoever these people are. But I think it's being like, what's my equivalent of them? Like, what traits of all these people who I look up to? Maybe pick 5 or 6 guys who you're like, okay, they're at the top of the top. And what traits do they have that I would want to embody to not necessarily become a carbon copy of them, but to be able to become the best version of myself following in their footsteps? I think that's cool.
Yes.
And I also think it's really important to have a positive male role model. And I am not selling my services here. I am booked out forever. So you need to find someone else. It's not going to be me. But you need to talk to them. But you need to find someone who you can actually have, because I mean, these people, they're not going to reply to your message, and that doesn't make them bad people. But you need someone who is going to reply to you. You need someone who can actually hold you accountable, that you look up to and go, okay, you're someone who I can work with, who is someone who I look up to, someone who embodies traits that I respect. which is important, or someone who's done work that I am yet to do, who is going to show me, but is also going to hold me to account, and whose respect I am going to want to earn in a healthy way. And that's why I encourage guys to learn martial arts. Like, one of the best things that you can do is find, set a high goal, and then have someone, the best martial arts coach that you can get. I don't give a fuck what discipline you learn. Get the one with the best coach where you live, and have a guy teach you how to fight. That is one of the most beneficial things you can do, because he is going to hold you accountable. He is going to be someone whose respect you're going to want to earn, and he is going to push you to a place of physical and psychological discomfort while keeping you safe, so that you can develop more resiliency for the other, how many other hours there are in a week, 24 times 7 minus 1. And that way you can actually apply those skills, you can apply those lessons to help you climb up the mountain. And I think that looking at it and going, kind of like what I was speaking about before, is going, okay, all this esoteric crap sounds wonderful, but how do I logically actually execute doing this?
Yeah.
And I think that that's a good place to start.
Yeah, I mean, I can completely, like, having a goal, but I think that, like, as you kind of alluded to there, the first point really is starting at that position where you go, I'm accepting of the fact that I've made mistakes. I'm accepting of the fact that, I'm in this position. I didn't put my best foot forward, or I didn't pay attention in school, or I didn't, create a situation for my future self based on my present self where I benefited or I flourished. But it's important to say also, I'm not doing the best I can, and I know that. There is a part of me that actually knows I can be better, and I'm lying to myself by saying that I'm not, because it's becoming like this whole empowerment and fucking, acceptance era. I think one of the big problems that people get wrong, especially with bullshit mindset coaches, is they practice acceptance, but they are absent of action. And one of the key points of acceptance therapies is, yes, we're looking at acceptance of emotions, experiences, and life and reality the way it is. We're not judging good or bad, but towards that is generally an action-based response, or a goal-orientated action-based response. And it first starts with accepting that I am not good at what I'm doing. I am not being the best I can. I am not at my best self, and it's my responsibility to action that. And then from there, being able to go, you know what? Now I have these goals. I want to pick a sport. I want to pick a hobby. I want to pick a discipline of martial art, and I'm going to just throw myself at it, see if I like it. If I don't like it, as you said, like Peterson talked about, is, pick a direction. If you have gone nowhere, any direction is better than no direction, but you're moving forward. From that step forward, if you get 10 paces up, you're like, you know what? Wrong path. Cool. Deviate. Go to the next one. Now you're 10 paces further forward, but I'm not going any further here. I can deviate here and go another 10, and then I can reassess. But the idea is continually progressing forward on the acceptance that you are actually being shit. And it comes with that reality and being hit in the face with the fact that you have been a shit person, or, not shit as in like, you're a piece of shit scumbag, but more so you have just lived a shit existence, pissing up the weekends, doing drugs, partying. We've all been a 20-year-old male. But at a certain point, you have to hit that reality and go, I can be better, and I've been weak. And right now, Ben is acting a fucking 5 out of 10. The Ben that I want to be is a 10 out of 10. And that's based on these traits and these people that I look up to. Well, what are they doing? Well, how do I get there? Well, I need to start actually actioning and talking about and embodying those people and acting in that manner. And from that, fuck me, the world opens up. If you just do those things at a bare minimum, the amount that your life changes. And, it's something I've had several conversations with. I'll be curious to hear your opinion on, but is people, I find when people go through self-development and they go through those early stages, there's almost an evolution, or you evolve past the initial groups that you engage in, because if people aren't ready for you to evolve and develop yourself, they will keep you where you are, and they won't support you, especially like I find male groups a lot like this. They will almost anchor you to who you used to be as you strive to try and be something better. So there's this point in time where you have to be able to evolve past those groups that are anchoring you and allow yourself to find new circles, new environments, new people where you can actually have big conversations, have real talks, have these conversations, talk about your goals, your ambitions, your dreams, and have people that will hold you accountable to a standard and go, okay, go fucking do it. We're not going to sit here and say, let's get pissed every weekend. We're going to say, hey, go do that thing, but you actually have to action it. And I find that, men's groups, especially, or like men's circles, those early coming out of your 20s groups that you might have coming from high school, they're not really about that. And there are the guys that get stuck there. And that's where I start to find the sitting around the glass table every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, getting pissed, sinking beers, sinking nose beers. It's the same cliche every time when you teach, like when I take a male client and I ask what they're up to, what their weekends are like, when I assess their lifestyle before they're training PEDs or nutrition, things like that, when I assess their life, it's the same 5, 6 things that are going on as every 20 to 24-year-old it goes through. And I say to them, like, how many of your friends are also going to the gym? How many of your friends are also into nutritional awareness? How many are also going to bed at 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, waking up at 5, 6:30 in the morning? And the circle of who's doing that is fucking small. So I'm like, cool. If you want to succeed in the thing that you're telling me you want, we have to move beyond this. And it's not to be a dick and say, hey, fuck your friends, get rid of them. It's more so you just simply won't succeed if this is where your circle lay. I don't know your opinions on that, but I found that to be very, very, very common amongst that group, that age demographic of men.
I'd say fuck your friends, get rid of them. But maybe that's just my perspective. I mean, I chose to come and live in the middle of nowhere. But look, I think that's completely true. I mean, you've got that cliche saying that like you're the product of your 5 closest friends, and I think that that's really important. And I think that the kind of people that you would want to hang around with and rub shoulders with will not hang out with you if you're a degenerate loser. And it's a harsh reflection, and people might not like my judgment, and that's cool. You can go cry about it and don't talk to me about it. That's fine. But I really think that I used to say past the age of 30, but maybe I've become less forgiving, and now I'll say past the age of 25. But if you're a dude and you're past the age of 25 and you're still binge drinking every weekend, you are a loser. And that's something that you can change. That's something that you don't need to do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And what you need to realize in terms of breaking it down is, why are you going to events or spending time with people that you can't stand being around unless you're shit-faced, intoxicated, disassociated? Because the problem with binge drinking and party culture, aside from the liver toxicity, which I see all the time, nothing fucks you up more than being a weekend warrior until you're into your 30s. If you want to see what healthy people look like, they're people who are in their late 40s and early 50s who stopped that shit years ago. Like, if you extrapolate that behavior out over decades, that's the thing that leads to chronic disease. But the other thing that it does is it's the opportunity cost. It's what you're missing from, in terms of the self-development, the positive relationships, the introspection, all these other things. Because if you're working 40 hours a week, you don't actually have time to piss around on the weekend every weekend. Also, the money that you're spending, the people that you're spending time with, all that kind of stuff is stuff that you should be spending that time, energy, and resources on stuff to level yourself up. Because at the end of the day, when you get to the point of being in your late 30s and 40s as a man, and I mean, I'm saying this as someone who just turned 31, is it comes down to your capacity. That's the most important thing, is what are you actually capable of? What kind of value can you provide? Because once you get older and you stop hanging around with these losers, is you'll realize that your value comes from like how much about like your value as an individual comes from how much value can you provide others. That's the role of man in society. It always has been, and it always will be. So if you're not service exchange, and it's not using people, it's understanding that like when you get older, you become friends with people in your network, but it's your skills that qualify you to hang out with that network of people. So it's extremely important. Like, and one of the coolest things that I found was that, like, I mean, because I spent a lot of time on my own, and when I was hanging around with like Ali and Luke Lehman and Charlie and these other people that we were spending time with, like the work ethic that these people have, I was like, okay, these people are on my level. But these people were working even harder than me, and I was like, okay, cool. Like this is where other people are at, and it was extremely beneficial to be like, okay, I'm not the only one here who's basically living like this, but also understanding, being like, cool, to be at this up echelon of where you want to be, there is a short-term sacrifice for long-term goal. And it can be difficult to break out of negative and destructive friendship groups. But I think one thing that, I mean, I'm just quoting other people, but I was listening to a podcast this morning with Alex Hormozy, and he was talking about how, like, when you're on your come up in terms of like, doing what you want to do in the world, you will lose friends as a result. And he was talking about in business, but it can be as personal development as well, because you're reminding them of their failure to take action. You are a human embodiment of a ugly reflection back on them of the opportunities that they wasted and the capacity that they wasted. And they'll root for you when you're the underdog, but then when you surpass them, because when you're the underdog, and this is what Hormozy said, I'm just paraphrasing, is, you're reminding them of their dreams and someone who's following in the dreams and being like, oh, cool, like good for them. But then when your dreams actually start to come true and you start making something of yourself, all of a sudden now they're like, oh, we'd actually rather drag you down. We liked you better back when you were like this, because you're
you've
reminding
changed.
them of their failures. Yeah, you've changed. And it's like, yeah, I have changed. I've actually grown out of you guys. And the most important thing that you can do as a man is be respected, not liked. Like, that's the most important thing, is that you earn and command respect. And that often does come from, letting go of people who are weighing you down. And I've let go of a huge amount of people who weighed me down over my 20s. One, because they weren't there for me when I needed them when I was going through my brain injury stuff. But also in terms of now being like, well, I see the stuff that you do on the weekends. I see the stuff that you do in your spare time. I don't really respect that, and I don't really identify with that. So I don't really want anything to do with it. And it doesn't mean that people are bad people. It doesn't mean that they're unlikable people. It just means that you only have a finite amount of fucks that you can give in a single day.
Mm-hmm.
And you should focus on giving those fucks to people who are going to, well, one, be people that you respect, but also be people who are embodying traits you identify with and that reflect positively back on you. And I think that if you don't, and it happens all the time in business as well, if you don't have friends and people in your network that are genuinely celebrating your wins, even when you surpass them, they're not your friend.
Yeah, completely agree. They were people that were trying to benefit and leverage off you until you got past them. We've covered so much here in just the, I guess, like the more of the philosophical mantra of masculinity and the absence of it in fucking what is blatant Western 21st century culture. My question then goes to, where does testosterone play its role here, and why has it declined? Why is it that when we look at, what was a man in the 40s who was willing at 15, 14, 16 to falsify data to be subscripted to, the American Defense Force, the American Army, Air Force, Navy, to be shipped off to the Pacific to fight in the fucking Pacific Theater against some of the most brutality and brutalizing humans that have ever existed. When we're looking at the invasion of Europe and people are going, you know what? I'm going to live in Leningrad, literally eat what was about the equivalent of 800 calories a day to fight off the German invader from confronting my homeland. These guys are being drafted, conscripted, pulled into the war. And some of them are literally, like, even in Australians were doing it, getting drafted at, I think my grandfather was 15 when he applied and the age was 16, so he lied. But we've got, guys back then, literally less than 2 generations ago, are like, you know what? I am going to do what I need to do to defend this country and defend my life and defend my existence. My purpose is clear for this next fucking however long. If my life is lost in pursuit of this, so be it. But it means that these people are safe and I took care of them. Okay. But I'm going to be, there's almost like the call to action of I'm going to be the one who defeats the big bad Nazi. And that comeuppance was met with such ferocity of excitement almost to almost like have this opportunity. Nowadays, I almost fear that another world war would start because the Western culture would just be absolutely abysmally destroyed. The desire for things like safe spaces and leftist-based culture and these emasculine traits, and I'm not even scared to say it because it fucking is. I'm on campus yearly now, weekly, and I study social sciences. Psychology is a social science. I'm in the fucking midst of it, and you just watch the ever decline of what it is to be masculine, driven, disciplined, genuinely strong-willed, because it's been somehow tabooed now as a negative concept. But we also then see correlating with that is a genuine social decline in testosterone levels. There is a correlation here. Where does that come from? And how is it a chicken or an egg situation? Are we just seeing that, well, obviously we know that we've talked about it already, resilience, comfort, we've talked about being uncomfortable, those things where people now are scared of being uncomfortable. They're scared of having those experiences. That has to be playing a role in the decline in the safety, the comfort that we all have now, and why we're seeing testosterone just going down.
I think it plays a very pivotal and underpinning role. I think there already has been another world war. I think we lost it. It started in 2020 and we lost it when there was no revolution. I mean, a whole bunch of people have been like, oh, why wasn't there a revolution? Why didn't we stand up against this shit? I was like, you tell me. I did. So it'll be an interesting thing in the next few years to see if people muzzle themselves and stay inside their houses again, or whether they actually fight back. We will find out. But you're completely right. And I think one of the most important things to understand about testosterone is that, to put it very simply, testosterone is a man's life force. It's masculine essence. And the way that it creates that from a scientific standpoint is it basically regulates dopamine transmission, in terms of it increases your brain's capacity to produce and synthesize dopamine, but it also offsets the effect of stress. So when we look at what DHT does, which, men voluntarily chemically castrate themselves to keep their pretty haircuts, what DHT does, which is what you lose when you take finasteride or dutasteride, is it increases two primary neurotransmitters: norepinephrine, which is like your brain's version of adrenaline, and GABA, which is the inhibitory brakes of the brain, which is kind of like what alcohol and things like benzodiazepines work on. So when you use those things in combination, you become driven and assertive, yet cool, calm, and collected under stress. That's what masculine energy is. It's drive and momentum forward, and it's the rock that the waves crash against. So we look at courage, when we look at bravery, these are not traits that testosterone just gives you. And I can say that for certain, working with many guys who inject themselves with all amounts of testosterone. It does not give it to you by default, but it creates the foundation for those traits to develop, and it creates the foundation for those traits to then manifest in someone's character and then in someone's actions. And what we're seeing now, and you're completely correct, is that men used to lie about their age so they could go and, and the wars that were fought were horrible. People were used as cannon fodder. It was all kinds of bullshit. But what was real was the fighting spirit of the men who said, I will run at the gunfire to protect the women and children and and my family and the country that I believe in. And that's gone. If China pops up and invades Australia tomorrow, which could happen any day now, people will just run. Like, there's a 0% chance that we'll actually form a revolution. I mean, men are cutting their dicks off and lying about their gender so they can win at women's sports. It's a joke. So I think that it's a twofold combination of endocrine disruption, actually threefold: endocrine disruption, a downstream effect of the post-industrial revolution diet, and also societal conditioning. And it all works in tandem. The most effective strategy for war is to sneak in at night and kill all the fighting age men. They did that. They just did that over a series of decades.
Yeah.
So when we look at the endocrine disruption that we've been experiencing, it's, again, I like things in threes. So pollutions, pesticides, and actually, that's not really in threes. So pollution and pesticides and plastics, they're the threes that we're looking at in terms of what are the main drivers for endocrine disruption in men, also in women as well. I mean, it's not like women are impervious to this. I don't know about you, but I know more women our age, like, 30 and under, who have endometriosis, PCOS, or some kind of issues with their cycle or fertility than I don't. Like, autoimmune conditions in women are fucking rampant. So they're seeing it as well. It's happening on both sides, and it's horrific. But we're getting bombarded with these endocrine disrupting chemicals from birth, both in terms of, the crap that they inject into babies. I mean, maybe people don't want to talk about that, but also wrapping everyone in plastic. And then when we look at the nutritional standpoint, we swapped out animal fat, which is an extremely important source of vitamins A, E, D, K, and cholesterol. And I know the vegans don't like to hear this, but that's how look at this, the graph of steroidogenesis. Yeah, I mean, cholesterol, every cell in your body is made from cholesterol. Yes, your liver can make its own cholesterol, sure, but that is a fail-safe to keep you alive. It's not so that you can thrive. It's two different things. And we swap that out with omega-6 rich industrial, basically, byproduct, which was vegetable oils. And that was one of the biggest devastating things that we've seen for our health. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing what happens if you do this, and then they reproduce, and then they reproduce. We're seeing the multi-generational downstream effect of removing one of the most important foundations for endocrine function and replacing it with something that's disrupting the inflammatory balance in the body. We swapped a good thing for a bad thing. And as a result, I mean, that's a huge shift. When you trade something good for something bad, it's not just going neutral. It's a huge movement to the wrong direction. So that's a factor as well. And then we're growing up in a world that is moving us away from a rite of passage. It's moving us away from taking a swing at life. And as a result, what's happening is, particularly guys who grow up and who are obese during puberty, I mean, that's also fucking their endocrine signaling in the development as well. And then what we're seeing now as a behavioral outcome of this is we're seeing guys aged between 16 and 25 not getting that peak androgenic surge, and they're not having the courage and bravery and resilience to go and want to take on life, go and want to be a risk taker, go and want to make something of themselves. And maybe they'll fall flat on their face, but they still want to take a swing and try. What we're getting now is people who are avoidant and afraid of just going outside. They are becoming overwhelmed by their feelings and self-diagnosing with adult onset mental health disorders and pumping themselves full of SSRIs, which are castrating them. And these are causing long-term downstream problems to their DNA, their genetics, and it's potentially going to impact their offspring in ways that we don't even understand. But I don't know about you, but I do not have a lot of hope for the young boys growing up. It looks fucking abysmal. And we are seeing a complete de-evolution of the human race. And it's because of the inputs in terms of the nutrition, the pesticides, pollutions, and the plastics, and then the lack of outputs. But I would also argue that it's difficult to have the outputs that we're wanting to have when the inputs are wrong. I mean, if the testosterone is low and the testosterone signaling is disrupted, life is going to feel less enjoyable and more stressful than it objectively is. And because humans, I mean, going back to the car analogy, because we're not just machines, we're sentient, it's natural that we're going to lead to avoidance behaviors. It's natural that we're going to lead to follow the path of least resistance, because that has been baked into our biology. So we're responding to that mammalian brain. And it doesn't mean people are weak or broken or there's something wrong with them. It's just like, this is, it's like nature versus nurture. It's both. It's always both. Everything is always both. So we're at a point now, which I think is very sad, but it's also maybe taking a turn where people are starting to realize and go, hey, there's something wrong here. And especially for the guys who are doing everything right. They're like, I'm eating well, I'm training, I'm doing everything right, and I'm 21 years old, and my dick doesn't work, and I'm anxious about everything. I have social anxiety disorder, I have major depressive disorder, I have inattentive ADHD, I have all these things wrong with me, and I'm doing everything right, and why do I feel like shit when I'm meant to be in my prime? And they're going to the doctor, and the doctor's gaslighting them and giving them a whole bunch of nonsense. And then they're actually educating themselves. They're solving the problem, because men are rational problem solvers. And they're coming up and realizing that their testosterone levels are dog shit. And that's where a lot of these guys are needing. And again, I'm not selling testosterone replacement therapy. If anything, it's important that guys do everything they can to avoid needing it. But for the guys who do everything right, and then they go, hang on, I have geriatric levels of testosterone at 21, even though I'm living like a monk, going, okay, maybe it's testosterone that's going to help me here. And when they do make that change and they actually give themselves the healthy testosterone levels that they should have earned based on their lifestyle and their habits, which is the most important thing, then you zoom out 5 or 10 years from that, and they're able to reclaim their kind of masculine birthright. And that's the thing that I'm most passionate about in terms of what I'm getting out there, is being like, because I'm booked out forever, is I'm writing as many books and doing as many lectures as I can on YouTube to go, here is all the content as cheaply as possible or as free as possible, so that you can educate yourselves, but you can understand the importance. And this is the most critical part, is that if you do not live, and this is the most important part with TRT, and this will break down hours and hours of research into side effects and doing it right, is that if you want to have the optimal level of testosterone for you, you have to be the guy who would be making optimal levels of testosterone if he could. And that's the part where people fuck up. They trash their bodies, they live like shit, they do everything wrong, they have low testosterone for a reason, or they had low testosterone to begin with and they were driven towards shit behaviors. That's understandable. People are humans, people are people. It doesn't make you bad. But it's understanding and going, okay, well, if I want to have the testosterone levels and inject myself with the levels of 21-year-old Giga Chad, and I'm binge drinking and obese and treating my body like shit, yeah, you're going to get side effects, bro, because you just put a Ferrari engine into a piece of shit Swift and didn't service the rest of the car, and you didn't learn how to drive. So that can be the difficult part, is that we have to service the car, but we also have to teach you how to drive. And that's the part where guys do one or do the other. And in reality, you have to do both. And when it comes to interventional endocrinology, like testosterone replacement therapy is a huge commitment that no one should take lightly. But it's also something where it's like, well, if you're backed up against the wall and you need an intervention and you're doing everything else right, it can be the thing that completely transforms and changes people's lives, which is why, I started it 7 years ago and dedicated my entire life and career to it since.
Yeah, and it's such a respect to just even the way we've had conversations and the way I've had conversations with Luke and Primal Zone in general is we've had the conversations about people that actually get more rejected than accepted because we need to look at the fact that people, and it's always been this case, like it's looked at as cheating because if you simply take test for any reason, then all of a sudden you're cheating your body and you're cheating life for some fucking reason, even though it's literally going to make you probably better if it needs to be. But it's looked at as like a failsafe. It's like a crux. It's like a justification for laziness. Like I can take this, I made this analogy and people laugh about it. I put a piece of content about it. Is when I was seeing my psychologist after my dad passed away, I went to her because I didn't feel the same level of grief as some of my family. I didn't feel the grief the way that others did. I felt grief for the sense of purpose and the sense of responsibility. I looked at it like I had to get back to work because, well, dad didn't die and fight his cancer and get sick in order for me to sit around and be depressed and miserable about it. There was something in the work he put in that I had to continue on. And so everyone was like, this is just going to be a delayed breakdown. You should go talk to someone. So because of the Cancer Foundation, we managed to get a psychologist that dad had a line. So I spoke to her and she was like, so why do you bodybuild? Why do you want to get into that? Why is that your purpose or your thing that you want? And I was explaining to her, the reasons behind it. And we got talking about testosterone. And she was like, if my son talked about steroids before, blah, blah, like, how would you describe it? I was like, to be honest, and this is going to confuse and probably piss off a lot of people because it isn't as technical as it needs to be. Testosterone in of itself is almost identical to the super soldier serum in that it exacerbates the traits you already have and exacerbates the person you already are. You see Red Skull when he takes it, and you see Captain America, the fucking freedom-loving, dick-swinging bald eagle of America, and you see the red Nazi, who is literally the embodiment of evil. Both take the same thing, give or take, they try to replicate. Actually, they did take it. And you end up with two vastly different people. One who is the pinnacle of health and his body is basically perfection. The other has his body, the inside ends up being the external because he is so evil and corrupt. His body just completely turns red as a skull and becomes the embodiment of death. That metaphor isn't an accident. But when I get people to understand, I'm like, that was the equivalent of getting into testosterone, provided you do everything right. Chris Evans' character, when you look at Steve Rogers, he was a freedom-loving, hard-working, like defend the young and the weak, fight for America. I want to enlist 16 times, even though I kept getting denied. That was the root cause of him getting his super soldier serum. That is exactly what you're describing here, is that the foundations are built first. Then you look at it and go, okay, but what is this going to give me? Is this going to be the tool that I need to get to the next level when everything else is in check? Everything else is right. And a lot of guys I find, as you sort of alluded to, don't have that concept down pat. It's almost like I can take this and offset all the dumb shit I'm doing. I can still look jacked, though my internals now is basically pissing black because I've eroded it and ruined it. But if I take test and I take some Masteron, I take some Tren, I'm going to be the absolute chat of the world. I'm going to fuck everyone and basically ruin my life because they think it somehow offsets all of the bullshit that they did on the weekend, Friday, Saturday night, Sunday night, woke up Monday morning hungover after 4 days of no sleep. Neurotoxins are going crazy in their brain. There's no fucking any sort of neural flushing or cleansing. Liver and kidney have been absolutely destroyed both injectably and fucking orally because you've been drinking and taking drugs. The reality is to get the most out of the thing that you are trying to do and have to use the least because, harm reduction, least effective dose is the most effective dose, is pick or choose. As Peterson puts it, you pick or choose your poison. And that's a non-negotiable for me and my clients is basically, if you want to go down this path now is basically forbidden. We don't do this. When you work with me, if this is the way we're going, we optimize lifestyle, we optimize health, we optimize nutrition, we optimize training. Then we worry about that other stuff. But the drinking, the partying, the binging is gone because that is not going to serve where we're going or amplify anything other than negativity.
Completely agree. And I love the marble analogy. And I think that Jordan Peterson spoke about this as well in terms of like walking the path of the hero. And I think that it's very important that people understand that there's a reason why everyone recognizes that Marvel movies went to shit after fucking Endgame. Is because they woke and they went left. And it's like, you don't even like watching the movies about how society is now. Like everyone knows the best Marvel movies were like the second Captain America movie, the first Iron Man movie, all of these ones that really embodied like the hero's journey. Like, and what people need to understand is going, okay, why don't I adopt the traits of the characters that I like watching?
Yes.
Like it's such a simple thing as going, we don't even like when we put all our culture and society values now into fiction. We're like, no, this is crap. This is boring. We don't like it. Walk the path of the hero. And I think that's a very good way to look at it. And, you know, the super soldier serum is a good example because it's absolutely, testosterone is an amplifier. I mean, it's like money. Money is an amplifier as well.
Mm-hmm.
And what testosterone does from a biochemical standpoint is it's non-inhibitory. It's like alcohol. You know, when people say, "Oh, I just said that because I was drunk. I didn't mean it." It's like, yeah, you did. Like that's
Yeah, you
why
did.
you said it.
Yeah.
You did mean it.
Yep.
Yeah. It
That
drops your
prefrontal cortex
inhibition.
is gone, baby. You meant it.
Yeah, yeah. So when things drop inhibition, then you become more of who you are. Now, if you're a dickhead, then testosterone is going to make you more of a dickhead. And
Yeah.
you know, sometimes people go, "Oh, I just need to be more true to myself." I'm like, maybe you don't, because maybe your values suck. Like maybe that's the worst thing for us. You know, Red Skull's a good example of that. You know, everyone who's done travesties in history probably thought they were doing the right thing. So it's important that people understand that, yeah, testosterone is going to be an amplifier and it's going to be uninhibitory. And that doesn't necessarily always equal a net positive, but it can. And one thing that's interesting with testosterone, when guys come back and they go, "Oh, now I keep losing my temper now. I used to have good control over my temper." I was like, "What temper? You didn't have a temper. Now you've got a temper and you don't know how to control it. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing." If I put a Ferrari, if I get you a Ferrari and you crash it, does it mean that the Ferrari was a bad car? No, it just means you didn't know how to drive it because it was more powerful going around the corner. So it can be important for guys to understand that testosterone is going to amplify a lot of your traits. It's going to be uninhibitory, and that can be an adjustment period. And I look at it like puberty. I really do. I think that going on TRT, particularly for young guys who haven't had that peak androgenic surge before, it's like going through a proper puberty. It's like a metamorphosis.
Oh, yeah.
Puberty takes 2 years. So the first 3 to 6 months, especially on TRT, can be a bumpy ride because now a whole bunch of your traits, which maybe you were too like, if you become obnoxious on TRT, it's not because you weren't obnoxious before, it's because you were too shy to actually say what you meant. And that can be a difficult thing for guys to learn how to grapple with. And that's why I think, again, going back, mindfulness is important because you learn to manage your stress response. You learn how to choose what you're going to say. And then martial arts is important because you need to learn that you suck at fighting and that getting hit hurts. It's important, guys.
Because you're taking TRT doesn't mean you can fight.
Oh, dude, like I was a DJ at a club for years, like way back when, and every single time I saw someone start a fight, they did not know how to fight. It was everyone who knew how to fight didn't start a fight, or they would run. So it's very important that guys learn, like, a reality check that, yeah, if you don't know how to fight, you suck at fighting and you shouldn't pick fights with people. That's super important. And but I think it's healthy for men to have a temper. I think it's important for men to be fiery. I think it is very, very important. But it's also important to learn how to regulate that temper. You know, Peterson, again, you know, you want to be a dangerous man, but you want to be a dangerous man who's disciplined and in control of himself. Because that's what's going to drive your capacity. That temper and that fire and that rage, that's the thing that you can channel into being a good person, on your purpose, doing the right thing by other people, because that's energy, that's life force. You just have to choose what you transmute that into. And that's not as esoteric and wanky as it sounds. I mean, you can wake up and drink a bunch of Jaeger bombs and do a bunch of cocaine and jerk off and play video games all day. I mean, you can do that if you want to. You have that choice. But you can also wake up and you can choose the path of being like, and this is where the sentience comes in, is going, we have the most, there's 2 things I think is very important. One is that we are the peak of human evolution and we're the dominant bloodline. So we are the furthest that human beings have come, even though we've devolved over the recent years. We're the human beings who've come this far, but we also are the dominant bloodline. So all the other bloodlines died off: famine, war, plagues, neighboring tribes. I mean, our bloodline is the one that survived. So we have this capacity to basically be the peak of human evolution, to be Mother Nature's apex predator. But we also have the most evolved brains out of anything in the world. So that evolved brain and that genetic capacity, and you're telling me that you're too anxious and depressed to clean your room and go outside? Like, fuck off. Like, fuck off. It's nonsense. Objectively, it's not true. But it doesn't, and I think that the most important thing that the guys need to understand is going, oh, fuck, now I feel like a piece of shit. It's not that because you're a piece of shit, but it's because you need to take a step back and go, hang on, I need to actually exert my free will here. I need to hijack my default mode network. I need to hijack this pattern of behavior that I've gotten into because I, as an intelligent, or at least remotely intelligent, I mean, if you've made it this far in the podcast, you've at least got some attention span, at least as a remotely intelligent sentient being, needs to be able to sit back and go, okay, this isn't working for me. This isn't getting me what I want. And actually taking a step back and going, is the discomfort of making a change greater than or less than the discomfort of continuing my bullshit?
Yes.
And a lot of the time, continuing your bullshit is going to net you much more discomfort over time. It's just that discomfort is front loaded if you make the change. So that can be why our habits perpetuate negatively, but it's also going, hang on, if I objectively look at this and logically look at this, I just need to actually force change, and I need to fake it till I make it. I need to hijack this bullshit series of patterns of behavior and make a change because I have the capacity to do that. And if you don't have the capacity to do that, you need to sit down and learn how to meditate, because the first thing you need to do, the overarching skill for all of this, is you need to be able to harness the power of your mind and your attention to do what you actually want to do. And otherwise you're just a leaf in the wind. And if you follow this breeze of society, you're going to be miserable, you're going to be sick, you're going to be depressed, you're going to be obese, you're going to be fucked, because that's where that wind is leading you. And that's a daunting thing. That's a difficult thing, but every single person is capable of that. And I mean, scroll down my Instagram feed far enough, you'll see that I was someone who didn't think I would end up here. I mean, it's a lot of people, particularly people who command respect or who are worthy of respect, they have a story of overcoming adversity. So that's a lot of I think that's the common denominator of men who are worthy of respect, is they've overcome adversity, and then they're now sharing their story of being like, well, this is what I got as a result of that. And you can overcome the adversity of your life as well. It's probably not that hard if you just break it down into small series of steps, or if you can reverse engineer it into habits. And again, I'm just quoting people because other people say smarter things than me. So Wes Watson says to be the man that you needed when you needed him. I think that's a good way to look at it.
That's
if
a
you
philosophy
whinge
of how I
that you didn't
coach.
if you're like, oh, I didn't have a strong father figure, I don't have a positive male role model, be that guy for yourself. Problem solved. Next. And the other one that he says is be the man that you admire in every way and give that man to the world. And I think that is such a powerful barometer for being like, okay, like what's my true north? Like what do I need to do here? It's going, okay, I'm going to be someone who I admire and who I respect and who I am proud to be. And I always tell guys, I'm like, you need to be proud of yourself. And they're like, oh, well, I'm not really proud of anything. I'm like, yeah, no shit. I wouldn't be either. So you need to do something that you should actually be proud of. And I think the most important thing to do that is to start to actually take care of yourself the way that you would take care of someone that you love. Because so many of us, particularly as men, we have this bullshit programming of like, I want to be a martyr. And it's like, it's not going to help. It's actually not going to help anyone. You don't need to self-sacrifice. You need to do it all. And if you can embody and be the person who is worthy of respect, and if you can do things that you're actually proud of in yourself, that radiates out. Because external validation, external gratification, that's for chicks. Dudes, internal validation comes from within. It comes from your capacity. It comes from what you've done, and it comes from what you can do. So you need to build a track record of shit that you're proud of. And then that's the first step. If you're proud and you respect yourself, then you can continue that momentum forward. And the way that it starts is that the diet actually starts tomorrow. You actually wake up tomorrow and don't hit snooze. It's not actually that hard. It's just breaking habits. And one of the things that I think, again, going back to the martial arts, I know I sound like a broken record. I am the worst Muay Thai fighter of all time, but I still keep going back because it's so important for me to do that every week, so that all the other challenges I have in life seem far smaller. I mean, I can't balance very well because my brain's fucked. I have like the tightest hips and the most fucked back. At one point, I was like 120 kilos, but I'd still rock up and do Muay Thai, and I would almost vomit every session. I'd usually have to tap out at some point because nothing is that hard over the course of my week. So as a result, it's not hard to get up at 4:30 to do burpees in the morning. It's not that hard to sit down and clear through all the emails that I don't want to do. It's not that hard to do all these little things that are uncomfortable because I've done something so much harder every week. But I also identify as the guy who chooses to go and do hard shit that he doesn't have to do for the sake of doing it. And that narrative is so beneficial to me because I respect that in other people and I respect it in myself.
Like, again, we could just basically do a podcast on quoting Peterson, but one of the best statements that he's ever made, and this goes to literally to most of the men that we listen to this, to the clients that we have, to the people that come from Primal Zone, that come from all the different networks people engage with us, is the solution or the answer often lies in the place that you least want to look and the work that you're not doing. If you just take that away from this conversation, before you get to TRT, before you get to depression, before you get to the self-diagnosed psychological behavioral disorders that you apparently have, before you get to those things, are you doing the work that you should be doing? Or are you avoiding the work that you know you should be doing? And therefore the answer doesn't lie in TRT and chemicals. The answer lie in the very thing that you're avoiding doing. And therefore you've got this deficiency you've created psychologically with this narrative that you've tied to being absent of a certain thing. If you simply start tomorrow doing the thing that you're avoiding doing, the likelihood is that things start to progress and spiral upwards. And that will take you to some form of direction in a positive net outcome that is better than where you are right now, because the person you are right now is avoiding the thing. The person that you are trying to become, that person doesn't avoid those things, doesn't avoid the hard work. Before, like, to get TRT to a healthy position first, before we look at exogenous supplementation, that person's doing the work. As you said, be the person who has high-performing levels of testosterone. If you want to be a successful business owner, be the person who is doing the high-performance level of business operations. If you're someone with a great physique who wants to be a bodybuilder, if you want to be a high-performing athlete, do the things, including the blood work, including the health checks, including the physiological stuff, including the psychological stuff, that is acting like that person that has those things in check. Because the very likelihood is that if you are someone who's in a depressed slump, who is in absence of testosterone, who has no psychological or tangible goals or physical things that you're trying to work towards, the chances are that the solutions to all those problems lay in just doing the thing that you are avoiding or scared of doing.
I couldn't agree more. And I've actually got a full lecture on YouTube. It's the Your Brain on Testosterone and the War on Masculinity Part 2, where it's speaking directly to the patient. It's very non-sciencey. It's exactly this topic. And I really believe that there are a bunch of people out there who are the minority who genuinely don't know what they're doing wrong. They genuinely don't know shit about nutrition. They're eating the standard Australian or American diet. They're doing their 30 minutes of physical activity every day. They're taking their antidepressants that the doctor told them to take. Yeah. And that sucks. And I really feel for those people. And there's a bunch of those people. But if you're listening to this podcast and I'm assuming that this isn't the first podcast that the listeners are listening to in this field. If it is, then hello. But yeah, I'm assuming that people who... Welcome and good day. Yeah, I'm sorry for the offense, but for everyone else who's made it this far, I'm assuming this is not your first foray into physical and mental health. And this whole podcast is on this theme of stop doing the things that you know you shouldn't be doing, and then start doing the things you know you should be doing. And if you do that consistently, if you are the person who has not done the things that they know they shouldn't be doing and done the things they know they should be doing for a prolonged period of time, for years, you will probably solve the majority of your problems. And if you don't solve the majority of your problems doing that, then you look into external things like testosterone and interventions and so forth. But that whole lecture is literally a PowerPoint presentation of being, these are the things that people shouldn't be doing that you're doing, and these are the things that you should be doing that you're not doing. I break them all down. And when in doubt, if you're like, I'm not watching this guy talk for an hour, fuck that, I can't be bothered. If you're fortunate enough that your grandma's still alive, call her. Ask her what you should be doing and listen to her advice. It's going to be eat less processed food, eat more home-cooked food, go outside more, stop playing video games, all that kind of stuff. All the shit that your grandma told you to do, just do that. That's simple, and that will probably solve most of it. But when I was speaking to a client this morning, and this is one of the main themes of that lecture, and this is just from experience. I mean, this is from working with thousands of guys on their TRT over the last few years. Drugs, alcohol, and junk food are the main things that people are doing that they shouldn't be doing, particularly alcohol. Casual alcoholism is something that people don't like to look at. And then the things that people aren't doing is positive mental health habits, like actually working on their mental health, like saying, oh, I've got all these mental health problems, as being like, oh, my muscles are small. It's like, well, go to the fucking gym. What are you doing about it? If your mental health is bad, it's like, what podcasts are you listening to? What mindfulness practices are you doing? Are you practicing things like doing cardio and sauna and ice baths, things that actually push the resiliency and actually challenge yourself? Or are you just drinking and hanging out with a bunch of degenerates and ruining your fucking life? Yeah, that's going to feel shit because you're watching yourself in real time fucking up your life and then you can't keep your shit together while you do it. Yeah, that's like watching yourself crash the car and not be able to move the steering wheel. Yeah, that's fucked. But a lot of the time, it's just a matter of stop poisoning yourself and start moving, and do that consistently over time, and don't bitch out. And if that doesn't solve the issue, then that's when, again, you look at things like exogenous hormones, because some people's systems are broken from the start as a
Yes.
result, downstream of all the stuff that we talked about before. And I fell into that category, and that was a really important point for me to understand. But that is such a core understanding, is a lot of people know exactly what they're fucking up, and they're watching themselves do it,
Yeah.
and they feel powerless to change it. And that's a horrible experience to have. That's a horrible lens to be looking at life through. That fucking sucks. But you can change it. And it's not that hard. It just takes work, and but I think it also, it does take a catalyst for a lot of people. It does take a moment. It does take some
Yeah.
degree of rock bottom, or a pseudo rock bottom, to hit, to go, oh fuck, okay, I screwed that up. Like Alex Hormozy, again, he said on a podcast the other day, he's like, a lot, I can't remember how, I'm going to butcher this, but he was saying, like, a lot of the things that you want in life are on the other side of the conversations that you don't want to have. And I'm like, that's very true. Like, that can be very true. But I also think that a lot of the things that you want, and the things that you want to be, are on the other side of habits that you can't be bothered doing. And at the end of the day, that's it. Like, I spent so long with a stiff, locked up back, and I still didn't practice daily mobility. And for the life of me, I don't know why I didn't do it, other than I was being lazy and I was looking for a shortcut. And eventually it just got to a point. It's kind of like when people wake up one day and they're hungover and they're like, oh, I'm never drinking again. And then you actually stop drinking.
That's actually
Like,
the time
you
you stop
have to
drinking.
get,
Yeah.
yeah. You just, and it's like, guys, you have to touch the stove a few times to realize it's hot
Yeah.
before you stop touching.
That's
That's
wet
just a
paint.
male thing. Yeah, yeah. But it's like, oh, the paint's wet now, I want to touch it. Like, it's just a dude thing. But it's okay to do that, as long as you actually, when you do go, oh, okay, now this time I'm not drinking again. Cool. Like, there was a point like a year ago where I was like, fuck, if I'd done daily mobility practices for the last year, I wouldn't be in pain anymore. And that was a really uncomfortable point to look at, to be like, one, I should have known better. And two, I know what the solution would be, but it's not something that I can achieve overnight, because I need to chronically do this over time. And at that point, I stuck with it. And I do my stretching and mobility work every single day, often twice a day, because I know that now, if I don't do it, I'm going to regress, and I'm going to lose the progress I made, and I'm going to go back to how I felt before. But I needed enough rock bottom points to actually go, okay, this is the solution. But it was understanding that I needed to be the guy who adopted positive daily habits a while ago. And that means I need to start adopting them now. And that's my biggest takeaway from this, is being like, what the person that you want to be is on the other side of consistently doing the habits that you're not doing over time. And the biohacks and the shortcuts and the entitlement mentality that if you change your diet tomorrow, if you've been eating like shit for 30 years, and then if you eat a good clean diet for 4 weeks, you're going to feel amazing. Yeah, it's like, that's not how it fucking works. And people will sell you shortcuts. People will, they'll promote whatever the fuck they have a 20% affiliate code to tell you that this will fast track your results. It won't. It's just, it's work over time.
It's always, 100%. I mean, that's pretty much like the best point to just wrap up the conversation, because we'll end up keep going for fucking ever, really, and it'll probably be a 5-part series. But I had some questions. I mean, we've answered something. One of the questions was going to be like, what is a way that you would suggest to wrap up optimizing your hormones? But I mean, just fucking listen to this 3 times and you'll get exactly what to do. What do you think is the number one problem that people have to optimizing their hormones? Let's say hormone. Let's actually narrow it down, because that's a big term. Let's narrow it down to testosterone. What is the number one problem contributing? I know you said there's like 3, 4, 5. And you had a couple of variations there. What do you think, as a final few questions, is the number one or the biggest factor contributing to low testosterone or the absence of testosterone?
I'll answer on all hormones, because I think the hormone disruption thing is multifactorial. But yeah, if we focus primarily on testosterone, I think that it's the the endocrine disruption externally, but people can't really do that much about that. I mean, you can get natural shower products and you can stop drinking out of plastic bottles, and you can do some stuff to mitigate the environment that we're in, but you don't have a time machine. You can't go back and do that from when you were a baby. So I don't like focusing on that stuff because that's all stuff that's outside of people's control. So in terms of the stuff that's within people's control, that is the biggest factor that's leading to them fucking up their hormones and fucking up their health. If I had to say number one, outside of just lifestyle's cheating, right? It's like if someone's like, well, what's the one exercise that you would do if you could only pick one exercise? It's like, oh, like a clean and press. It's like, well, that's multiple movements at once. That's cheating. Yeah. So it's lifestyle. But if I had to put it down to one thing, it's probably nutrition followed by movement. They would be the two biggest things. And then nutrition, movement. People talk about sleep a lot. I think that's a factor too, but I think that the reason why people sleep like shit is downstream from lifestyle. I think that
agreed.
I've met very few tradies with insomnia. Very few. I've met far more people with injuries from sitting at a fucking desk and they have laying bricks. And it's not that, well, actually, I meet the most people with injuries from doing fucking jiu-jitsu, but when it comes to injuries and when it comes to issues with overall health, it's lifestyle, and it's what you're doing for every hour that you're awake multiplied. People focus on, oh, I'm going to do, an hour of this every week, and I'm going to, take milligrams of this supplement every day. It's like, what are you doing for the rest of the day? And what are you eating for the kilograms of food that you're putting into your body over the course of the week? That's the thing that people are fucking up. But I think nutrition's the biggest factor, because if we go back to the health of the car, or if the car keeps falling apart, it's like, well, it's either you're driving it like shit, that's often a factor, but it's also the fuel you're putting in the car, what fuel you're putting through the engine. So people are putting bullshit inflammatory foods into the body, hyper-processed garbage, which is, people will say, oh, processed food isn't bad for you if you eat it in the right, macros and calories and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we'll find out when there's more data on it downstream, but I don't want to be the science experiment that's going to fuck around and find out. So I think that if people can focus on putting good quality nutrition into their body as a foundation, that will inevitably mean that they have to also take out the shit food. And I think that that's one of the biggest trades that people can do, is focusing on nutrition. And I am not a nutrition expert at all. And all the vegan people will whinge and complain about this, but eat more meat, like eat more red meat. If we want to make it super simple, eat more red meat, more egg yolks, good quality, like organic dairy, if you can access it and you can digest it well, but eat more meat and eat less stuff that isn't meat that comes out of packets. That's simple. Because what's very interesting when you look at the composition of red meat and when you look at the main micronutrients that humans are deficient in, it's the same thing. What are most people deficient in? Iron, well, for chicks, iron, zinc. Guys take creatine, low amounts of amino acids to actually promote muscle protein synthesis and neurotransmitter function, potassium. All of these things that are present in red meat, people are not eating enough of. So eating more meat, particularly red meat. And if you're listening to this in Australia, I mean, I live in Eastern Europe where red meat's very hard to come by. It's mainly pork, chicken, and fish. If you're in Australia and you're not eating an abundance of good quality red meat, and you're not going out in the sun, you are wasting two of the biggest opportunities to leverage your health. So nutrition's a factor, and then movement's the second one. And I think that, the patient population or the client population listening to this is probably biased in favor of doing enough movement, but people are not moving enough, particularly with this sedentary lifestyle that people have from spending too much time indoors since COVID. Like, people need to move more. Like, one thing I tell all my clients is, like, if you have a sedentary job, one, download Audible, or if you don't want to pay fucking $15 a month, then find some podcasts that you like and go on walks every day listening for something to get your 10,000 steps in. And the other thing I tell people to do is get some form of home fitness equipment. Like, I like people to have I travel with a TRX and like the thin Rogue resistance bands. And when I'm at home, I've also got like a 16 kilo kettlebell, and I've got like some 5 kilo and some 10 kilo dumbbells. And like, I'll just dick around a little bit with some weights and some resistance bands and some TRX, do mobility a few times a day between calls, in addition to training. Because that's the most important thing that guys are not getting, is that they're staying indoors all the time, and they're like, oh, well, I'm still going to the gym, 4 times a week. And I'm like, yeah, and then you're literally sedentary for the rest of the week. It's like, that is not enough. You need to move more. You need to take your body through full ranges of motion every day, multiple times a day, to actually have the experience of being an alive human being. So eat more meat and move more. Those are, to ruin the question and give two answers for it. Those in combination extrapolated out over time, that's the key.
Yeah, no, I like it. Well, I was going to actually finish off with one book you'd recommend, but I'm going to actually combine it with another question that we're going to finish off with, which is, tell us about the book that you have released and why is the book that you'd recommend to read?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd be biased to say to read my book, but I think there are better books than my book for people to read in general. There's a few books that I've read that have been very impactful on my life, and I'm sure they're going to be the same cliche books, but there's a few podcasts I've listened to that have also been very impactful, or just as impactful. So I'll rattle off all of them, and there's probably a few more that are on the last slide of my first War on Masculinity lecture, where they're all detailed out specifically. But the book that changed, there was a few books that changed my life. One was Jocko Willink's book. I think it's Extreme Ownership.
Yeah,
Extreme Ownership. Title. Yeah. One with Leif Babin, where they narrate it on Audible. That book was very empowering for me in terms of starting the initial internal dialogue in terms of taking full responsibility for everything that was in my life. And that's been I think that's such a powerful core philosophy to have in terms of being like, yeah, the world's fucked. Yeah, a whole bunch of this stuff's fucked. Yeah, all of this shit is absolutely whack. But how you respond to it and what your circumstances are, if you take control and take ownership of things, then you will inevitably be able to make change. And it's important to understand that you still have to play the ball where it lands. So you can sit and whinge about how the ball's landed in a pile of dog shit, but you still have to pick it up and play it, because that's just life. So that was a very powerful book for me to read. The David Goggins Can't Hurt Me book was very powerful. When I did when I was doing rehab for my head injury, his first podcast with Rogan, which was essentially like a summary of that book, because the book hadn't come out yet, I just listened to that on repeat. I probably listened to it 100 times. Because I found that story to be particularly inspiring, because I could identify very strongly with like, oh yeah, you hear all these stories of people who do this or do that or overcome adversity. And I never, ever, 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 ever thought I would be someone who could do that. And hearing his story in terms of being like, well, he was even more fucked and off track than the situation I was in. And then he did things that were absolutely disturbing that a human being can even do.
Correct.
That to me was very empowering, because I was like, well, if he could do that, then why can't I do this? And that was very helpful for me. And another one that I really like is the Way of the Superior Man by David Dieta. And I would layer that with The Rational Male by Rollo Tomasi. I think those are two books that are important that men read, because they give two different sides of the equation. And also, I'm going to throw in another one, The Tactical Guide to Women by Sean T. Smith. I think those three books are very important in terms of understanding male and female polarity, intersexual dynamics, but with the outcome focused towards having positive, healthy relationships with women. So I'd read those three in tandem. And in terms of podcasts, there's a recent podcast, Modern Wisdom podcast with Chris, is it Wilkinson and Alex
Chris
Hormozi.
Williamson. Yep.
The most recent one they did where they're in person, that podcast is unreal. The amount that's like a book summarized. I mean, they could write a book on that, but that's like a book summarized. It's an amazing podcast. Highly recommend everyone listens to that. And the first podcast Wes Watson did with Flex Lewis, that's a really good podcast on habits and that kind of mindset as well. I think that's worth listening to. And yeah, I'd probably leave it at that. I think that's a good summary of content that guys can listen to. But it's also I also really enjoy both of Andrew Tate's podcast with, I'm not sure what his name is, but he's like a psychologist. He gets interviewed by a psychologist twice. Both that? The first one and the second one are phenomenal. So if you just search Andrew Tate psychologist, it'll come up. They are phenomenal. And in the second one, he actually references that a lot of people say that their first interview was his best interview ever. And I really agree, because it's breaking down a lot of these perspectives and philosophies that he has and having them challenged, but also finding that they essentially hold up from scrutiny. So I think that all of that stuff together, if that would be probably 20, 30 hours of content all up. And I think that would be a fantastic thing for guys to go on walks to and listen to and contemplate, and particularly going on walks outside and listening to those things. I like audiobooks. I don't like sitting and reading. I do audiobooks.
Yeah, I'm very
And
similar.
I think if you got to the end of all that content, you would have a very different perspective and also accountability towards yourself.
Yes.
And I think that's another key, is holding yourself accountable. And in terms of my books, I've written 2 books specifically on TRT. So for anyone who wants to hear more about the discourse of this conversation, I check out my YouTube videos, the War on Masculinity series I've done. But for anyone who's wanting to get into TRT and the nitty gritty of it, I've basically put all my intellectual property, all my experience, everything I could possibly understand about TRT, and I've written instruction manuals that were kind of like the instruction manuals that came with video games when I was a kid, like Nintendo 64 video games that would give you like the controls and the summary and like that kind of stuff. That's what these books are. They're the instruction manual that should come with TRT. So it's not like a what is TRT, it's more a how do you actually do it, and it's laid out to kind of educate and empower guys to wrap your head around it, to know, okay, here's an actual action plan that I can follow to actually get this dialed in. I charge 29 Australian dollars for them, so they're super cheap. And the second one, and I could charge hundreds and hundreds of dollars for them, which other people in the space do, but I want this content to be accessible for everyone. And the second book that I've just put out is Beyond TRT, and that's for troubleshooting. So this is pregnenolone, DHEA, thyroid, HCG, fertility, and estrogen management, which are like the pitfalls, the areas that have a lot of myths discussed online. And this is basically all my in the trenches experience in terms of being like, this is how you wrap your head around these concepts. This is what you need to know, but it's written for people with no scientific background. It's written basically for my clients, for guys who are like, hey, I'm a tradie, I'm an office worker, I work in IT, I've just started TRT, all this stuff's bamboozling and confusing the fuck out of me. Cool, read these and you'll have everything you need to know. So they're available on my website, advancedfundamentalhealth.com. And if you'd like to work with me, I am booked out until the middle of the year, but you can put an inquiry on my website to get notifications for upcoming appointments if anyone would like coaching with me. Otherwise, I also do have my own clinic, which was mentioned before, which is Primal Zone, which is an Australian TRT clinic. And people can contact them directly to work with me and the team on doing TRT properly.
Man, I love it. I've absolutely taken up a shit ton of your time, and I appreciate your brain and wisdom and just the mutual philosophy and discourse here, because I think, as we both would agree, conversations like this need to fucking happen for men and just generally for society. So I absolutely appreciate your time on this, what is Monday morning for you. We will leave all links, details, and contact locations and whatnot, socials, in the description below. That's a Brooklyn job, not my job, because I don't know how to do that shit, but she will take care of it. That's her domain. But mate, again, I appreciate the chat, and I look forward to more conversations with us over many years to come, no doubt, given our both shared interest in these realms.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me, and for everyone who's listening, thank you for your attention, and hope you found it valuable.
Cheers, mate.